exactly, you know, the education budget comes directly out of the general fund that is paid for by the taxpayers of Maine. So I'm not sure what the questioner needed to know.
I think they're basically saying that the financing of the education system in itself is becoming expensive. And do you have any suggestions to fix, instead of cutting things, adding things and how much you
Is that a question about higher education or?
I just said education system.
Because financing is something people have to do for getting a higher education. Is a lot of times people have to take out loans and those kinds of things. And one thing we can do is try to hold the line on the cost of tuition. And I believe one of the candidates for governor has an idea to renegotiate the state liquor contract in order to get money to help lower the cost of tuition, to invest more in higher education. And I think that's an idea that deserves exploration.
Yeah, I just want to add that that's really a difficult question to answer because one of the things that the Governor Baldacci, when he put his task force together, one of the things that they came back with was that across the line in the higher education and K through 12, spending or cost of education and results, there was no equation. They didn't. Spending and results didn't equate. They just, you could spend a lot and have poor results, and you could spend a little and have poor results. And the other way around with good results. So dollar and cents wise investing in education may not always be a dollar and cents value. It may be an investment that the parents have to make, the community has to make, and a dollar investment as well.
Couple of things. There's no question that I believe there's top heavy in education as well. There's too many administrators. I know there were in Auburn when I was teaching. So that's part of the problem, and we tried to fix it with consolidation. It hasn't totally worked for sure. Also, we spend a lot more money on special education than we used to. That's where a lot of our money goes. And the federal government, when they mandated all this, we're supposed to pay 40% of it, and they've never even reached 20%. So we're picking up the slack. So that's a big chunk of it too. And just so if anybody doesn't know, we did pass a bill 3 years ago, maybe 4, and it's run by FAME and Opportunity Maine. So if any Maine student goes to a Maine school and borrows money and then stays in Maine and works, they can, right now it's averaging about $2,000 a year, and it'll steadily go up for 4 years, that they get a tax credit on their Maine income tax, which is like money. So if they owe $3,000 in Maine income tax, they'll only pay $1,000 or whatever it is. So, but you got to do it up front. You can't do it, wait until you're a senior and try to get it from those back years. So just pass the word out, make sure they check with their financial aid offices and get the form signed and so forth at the beginning, because that can help.
I jump in, just a couple things. As was kind of said earlier, we know around the country spending more money in education doesn't necessarily mean better education. Some of the biggest cities in the country, like Washington, D.C., Detroit, spend the most money, and they have really poor results in a lot of cases. It's really kind of, to me, it's kind of a societal issue. I mentioned a couple times my wife is a principal, and she's really good. She does a great job. She's in a tough neighborhood, and the family's very involved. She could spend her whole day, whole day in the office, door closed, and never interact with children at all. And that's because of rules and regulations and paperwork, not necessarily from Maine, but also federally. She could spend her whole day. And part of her taking the job was that she said, I'm not going to do that. So my wife comes home every night, and we eat dinner, and then she literally is on her laptop until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So there's all the rules and regulations. There's also, I know from my years, I was a school board member for 6 years in Raymond, And it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago now, I kind of completed it. But people are looking more to the schools to do things that they didn't always look to. They're looking more for the schools to be social workers and things that I don't think our schools were meant to be in the beginning. So it's a really complicated question because there's a lot of societal burdens, paperwork burdens that really inhibit teachers doing their jobs, kids learning. Kids show up and they haven't had breakfast, things like that. So it's a pretty tough question.
I guess I will add to that and say that I think, again, part of this question is about how we have to change our culture. My wife and I often have the discussion of what are we going to pursue for our children. We have a 5th grader and a 2nd grader at McMahon, and we often talk about public school education versus private school education and the benefits of each. And I think what it comes down to is no matter where you send your kids to school, there is a significant burden that the family has to bear. How successful your children are going to be has a lot to do with what they're getting at home. I have a stepmother who spent 40 years in the New York City Department of Education. Many of those years as principal and then in the superintendent's office, where if there was a school in the city that was underperforming, she was the person that got called in to make things right. And I can tell you from her experience that there are significant things that we are able to do both in changing the culture of the school in terms of how families are integrated into what happens for children, but also in looking at increasing the transparency of how things are done as well as the accountability. And as I heard someone say, a lot of our schools are top-heavy in terms of administration. And we know from across the country there is good data that we can do things better. And we just have to look at how we're going to change our culture here to make that so.
While there are certainly successes, there are many situations in which public assistance fails to get folks back on their feet. At the expense of taxpayers, where do you see problems in public assistance programs, and how can they be remedied?
Oh, good, an easy question.
I'll take that. First of all, there's a lot of talk right now about welfare residency requirements, and a lot of candidates are pushing that as what they'll do, for, the people. Well, welfare residency requirements are against the Constitution, and if you've done any research, you would know that. There are many Supreme Court cases that state this. Durational residency requirements are something that is being tried in different states on different programs, such as TANF and general assistance. They can be done with exclusions. But some of the things that the state of Maine could think about are checking for welfare fraud across state lines. Right now we use the honor system, so that's one thing that we could do. Other things, I'm running a blank here, it's getting late. But other things that we could do that other states do. I'm trying to think, I have a bill in it, I'm trying to think of what it is, but someone else go and I'll think of what it is, sorry.
I know that some other states, if you're moving from one state to another, and you, in that move, you're going to get for your maximum benefit what you got in the state you moved from, not what is from the state you moved to. So that, that's those type of welfare reforms have stood up in court. But this business of, you got to live here 30 days, 60 days, 90 days before you get $1, that's been thrown out in every state that's tried it. And to me, that's a no-go, but I do think we need to look at other areas, lifetime benefits, timeline.
Yeah, I just came back to me. What he's talking about are durational residency requirements. Durational residency requirements are, if you move from one state to the next, then you keep the benefit from the previous state for a period of time. It could be 6 months, it could be a year. Maine's top welfare benefit is $485. New Hampshire's, I believe, is close to 600. Vermont's is above ours also. So, I'm sure that there are very few states that are under the 485. But one thing we could do is, with the durational residency requirements, with exclusions, is if someone moved here from another state with a higher benefit, then for the lower benefit, then they would still receive that lower benefit for 6 months to a year until they, so that kind of discourages people from moving here to get a higher benefit. Another thing that we could do is drug testing. We do not do it now. That is also against the Constitution to trust every applicant for drugs. But what we could do is test people who are suspected to be on drugs and get them into a drug rehab program so they become productive citizens.
If I could jump in here as well. I think we have to be clear on what we mean by welfare. If we're talking about sort of traditional assistance for someone who has a child and is living at home, I mean, the federal law is now that people have to be working or they have to be studying or doing volunteer work. And we have the lowest TANF rate in New England, which is important for people to remember because they're always saying that people are coming here because we have such generous benefits. We have the lowest TANF rate in New England in terms of what people get paid who are on TANF or what they earn. If you're talking about public assistance, it's just really, really important to remember that of the DHHS budget, about 2/3 of it goes to the elderly, disabled, and children. When we're talking about public assistance programs, there are very few families in the state, including the people in this room, that are not benefiting from them in one way or the other. It might be that because you have a parent in a nursing home that's benefiting. It might be because you have a nephew who has a brain injury and is benefiting. The list goes on in terms of DHHS programs that are there to help families in need. So there's a stereotype of welfare, but people just need to remember that DHHS budget is running programs that are benefiting just about all of us in one way or another.
I would agree with my colleague that there are certainly a significant number of our population who benefit from these services. I would say, though, that it's almost like this is the elephants in the room that no one ever wants to talk about. And I think, again, you've heard me say a couple of times tonight, we have to look at how to change our culture. We have created a culture in Maine where people have significant benefits who may not necessarily need to be receiving those benefits. We're not talking about the elderly people. We're not talking about the single mothers. We're not talking about the children. I can tell you, as a family physician, as an emergency physician, I've been in the state for over a decade, providing care for people, many of whom need the care I provide. But I will share with you that I've had people say to me when doing a medical history, "What do you do for work?" saying to me things like, "I don't work." And I say, "Well, why not?" "Because I don't have to." So people have that attitude that, and saying to someone who's working a lot, we have a culture here where that is somewhat the norm for a significant amount of our population. I will also say to you that in terms of the healthcare services that I provide services that are very much needed. However, in the mix of people I see a great deal of people who have no respect for the services they are being offered, partly, I believe, because they are not required to pay anything, even a copay for those services. And there is no value in what those services are. People come to see me in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning for a hangnail, literally. So what I'm expressing to you is that we have a real need to change the culture of how we live, work, and operate in Maine.
Can I add to that? I appreciate what Joel's saying. He's about 3 times tonight, he's brought subjects back and said, what's our goal? What are we thinking about this? And I would assume everybody here would agree that there are people in society that really need support. And that's what the system was created for in the first place, for those people that are disabled or elderly or what have you. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But I worked in my first career,